There's our shield status. Where's it weakest? In that corner there, see? You don't want to fire right there. Lucky that the monitor just switched to that at the right time. Alright everyone, welcome to Star Trek Prodigy Episode 10, A Moral Star Part 2. And since last episode, A Moral Star Part 1, I clued into the idea that a moral star is actually an anagram of Tars Lamora, the mining colony from which our protagonists originally came from. So there you go. There's an interesting little tidbit for you to chew on, to nosh on with your teeth. And I watched this episode 3 times now, and I must say, although it may not seem logical, sometimes having questions is better than having answers. Because this episode, being the second half of a 2-parter, it answered interesting questions with not so interesting answers, I must say. Unfortunately, time travel is involved. You know how I feel about time travel if you've been hanging around this channel for a while. I don't love it. Sometimes time travel can lead to good episodes, but I find that, on the whole, time travel usually adds more confusion than it adds fun or intrigue. That's just how I feel. I find that my brain wants to think of things logically and objectively and from an A to B fashion, not from B to A, or A to C, or Z to A. I'm more A to B. That's why I get to wear red. I don't understand the big things, but I like the small things. I like the little details. The overarching picture, not so much. But your mileage may vary, of course. This episode, A Moral Star Part 2, is a direct continuation of A Moral Star Part 1, which I liked that episode a lot. Didn't quite like this one as much. Like I said, as soon as you introduce time travel, you can then pick it apart infinitely. The second time travel is involved, we can needle into it and take out any little detail and then claim that as some evidence why nothing makes sense. So I'm going to try my best to not destroy this episode just by having time travel. Okay. However, a lot of this episode's failings are actually not because of time travel, but we'll get into that in a moment. Our episode starts off with our characters being left over on the Rev 12, which is the Diviner's ship. So Diviner has traded the Rev 12 for the Protostar, which is an even trade for him, because he just wanted the Protostar all along. Gwyn is fighting hand-to-hand with the Diviner on the Protostar, so the gauntlet is down now. We're just fighting each other now. We've given up any pretense of trying to convince each other. We're just going to have to fight the Diviner, which is fine, because this whole series so far was notably lacking open fighting. So we've earned it. We've earned this fight at the end, I think. And this is not a season finale, but it sure feels like it. This feels a lot like it was supposed to be the original end of this season, but for some reason we're continuing the other half of the season, and this is a 20-episode season like it's a normal show again. But I digress. It turns out the Diviner wants to get back to Starfleet, raising the question, why didn't he just allow them to go to Starfleet? I mean, he had to have thought that eventually they would try to go back to Starfleet and meet a Federation ship eventually, but I guess he just wants to make sure. He wants to get to Starfleet for reasons that I'm about to divulge in a minute. Our characters are meanwhile on the Rev 12 are trying to get the power restored so we can have gravity. Okay, and we can have atmosphere, I suppose. So, ticking clock. What are we going to do? Dal is modifying the ankle bracelets so that they all work as a comm badge, for the universal translator. I don't know. it's a little far-fetched. This episode is punctuated with hokiness and a little bit of far-fetched concepts here and there, but overall good. Jankum and Rok are trying to get the core of the Rev 12 back online, discovering that much in the same way that they disabled the Protostar by stealing its core, the power core from the Rev 12 is gone. So their solution, originally Jankum's fixing it, but him being the engineer, he's fixing it, but rok-tahk takes over fixing it, because I guess rok-tahk is now an engineer too. It's kind of weird that we have two engineers on this show. It's not unreasonable to have two engineer characters. It's just weird. Like, you're kind of like stepping on Jankum's toes here. I think maybe rok-tahk should be in sciences or something. I don't know. She seems to be good with computers. Is that sciences? Don't ask me. I just hit things with a wrench. But we eventually get the Rev 12 power supply back online with some technobabble, but also I think, if I read this correctly, they're using a little bit of the protocore energy that Murph has in its body to supply power to the systems. If you don't remember where they hid the protostar inside the U.S.S. protostar, the protocore, where they hid it, they fed it to Murph. So Murph swallowed it, and so anyway, they're extracting that power to bring the shields of the Rev 12 back online and make it able to support life once again. So Dal is rounding up her hostages, former slaves, and now they can all talk to each other because of their foot bracelets have been modified with comm badge technology. I don't know, but it leads to a funny scene where they've been working with each other for all these years, and they can finally talk. I've always wanted to tell you this and that. Oh my God, all these thoughts and feelings I've been holding inside. I can finally talk to you. Wow. Just imagine working with somebody for years and then not being able to talk to them, and then you can finally talk to them, and you're trying to say everything you've been thinking, but then you have to be rushed off by Dal because something's about to go wrong, and we don't know if we're going to be able to get the shields back online. So please get going. You need to get safety. It's just a funny moment. So, meanwhile, the diviner is thinking, I have everything I need. I have the protostar. I'm going to Starfleet. But then we find out, originally back in part 1, why it was that one of the characters is saying, wow, you made some good upgrades to this program. Remember, if you go back to the first episode of Moral Star Part 1, you can find out all the little hints. There's a setup for every single thing that happens in this episode. There's a good setup in Part 1 that explains why it makes sense now, and now I get it. The reason why they were messing around with the computers was because they were trying to sabotage it even further. Stealing the protocore was only Part 1. Part 2 was reprogramming Janeway's holo program. All that stuff about evil, dark, goth Janeway was a joke. That wasn't real, which is why it was so funny. I was laughing my ass off thinking about it, only to find out that it was a joke and I was had. It tricked me too. Did it trick you? Janeway was never evil Janeway in this episode. She just went and went back to normal Janeway. I only answered to Starfleet. I've had a few upgrades, and then pushes the diviner away because Holo Janeway is now solid, which is possible in Star Trek. We've had solid holograms before. This is great, and you get to see a solid Holo Janeway. Imagine a gender-bent Janeway from another timeline called Johnway. I've never thought of that before until right now, and it was an accident. Anyway, Janeway rips off one of these tubes off of the diviner's suit. I'm not sure what it's exactly for, but you get the impression that it hurts him a lot. And finally, the diviner is on the back foot, he's losing, and explains the truth of what's going on to his daughter, Gwyn. Taking her out to the holodeck. Take me out to the holosuite. And they go out there, and we find out that the diviner is from the future and was sent back in time in order to prevent first contact between Starfleet and his home planet, because he shows her Solum, their home planet. Everything's beautiful. And then he fast forwards 50 years to the time he's from, and it's destroyed by civil war, because just the arrival of Starfleet triggered a civil war on their planet, which is possible, and it's an interesting concept. Just the arrival of aliens, instead of being a unifying force, it was actually a dividing force for the people of that planet, which is a concept that I think it's cool we're finally exploring. However, I'm not saying it hasn't been done before. What I'm saying is that I'm not all-knowing. I don't know. I don't remember every single first contact scenario, although I should, because we have the book on it here. But this is interesting because it's flipping things on its head. It's showing that there's a possible negative externality of the arrival of Starfleet. We explored this a bit in Deep Space Nine, but it's here again as well. So what's the Diviner's plan? Well, the Diviner has inserted kind of like a computer virus into the Protostar, okay? And when the Protostar makes contact with another Starfleet vessel, it will corrupt their systems, and that corruption will spread to the entire Federation, causing them to go into a civil war and kill each other. So we got a virus from the future, we got someone preventing first contact, and we got someone going back in time for revenge. Where have we seen these before? Look, it's Discovery Season 2, that crap with Control, and I've been trying to block out Discovery, but there was something in Discovery Season 2 where a program came back from the future by upgrading a shuttle with strange technology, and that virus infected Starfleet, and then Control tried to get data from inside of Discovery so it could become sentient. I think that happened in Discovery Season 2, so there's that one. Number 2, First Contact. Self-evident. The film Star Trek First Contact. It was about preventing the first contact between one race and another. 3, we're going back in time for revenge. Okay, and that's kind of like... kind of reminded me of Star Trek 2009. Nero went back in time to punish Spock for failing to save his homeworld. That being Romulus. So, 2 of those things are kind of similar, but then the last one is kind of unique. Regardless, these 3 not great concepts put together make for one not wonderful villain. I like the Diviner up until the last episode. Not personally. I don't really take kindly to slavery, but I thought he was kind of interesting because he was a character that seemed like he genuinely had to get the Protostar for a reason he genuinely believed was good, right? He believed it was, I assumed, the preservation of his species, which is sadly extinct. Or so we thought. His methods, a little strange, needless to say. However, they kind of... the last episode, they made him shoot the Rev-12 to disable its life support. And I was just like, why? And in this episode, we find out he's a time-traveling maniac who wants to corrupt computer systems to cause a different war. And these problems don't necessarily have to do with time travel, but if we think of it logically, if he has gone back in time and he had a holodeck program saved, and it was presumably a video recording of his homeworld, why could he not take that to Solum, show them the video of what will happen in the future to possibly prevent the Civil War? I mean, I know it's not a guarantee, but it must be better than destroying Starfleet, right? And if it doesn't work, can we go back in time again and try again? Is there a limit to how many times we can time travel? And if we're about to die from old age, can we not create a progeny to do it again? which is exactly what he did, except this time he failed because Gwyn was corrupted by the values of Starfleet, so to speak. So a lot of interesting concepts going on, muddled by some mustache twirling, some strange writing, and some slightly confusing plot elements, I might say. Again, time travel being what it is, your mileage may vary. It made for a great emotional arc for this mid-season finale. But does it make perfect sense? I don't know. Regardless, Dal, Jankum, rok-tahk, and Murph, we get the Rev 12 back online, but not before Dreadnought has a chance to beam in guns blazing against these previous slaves who have now been freed. And we get this hokey line saying, "We have a voice now. Good for us, bad for you." And then the slaves just tear at Dreadnought and tear him to pieces. And we've seen this before in Discovery, I think, where the slaves get freed and attack the slave owner. I mean, have we not seen this in a million movies? It was a little bit hokey, a little bit on the nose, and a little bit obvious. And I was kind of saddened by that from a series so far that has otherwise been very novel in its ideas and intriguing. So, Dreadnought is destroyed, or is he? And, Murph is all angry. It's the cutest thing ever, but Murph is angry because Dreadnought got a lock on the coordinates of the protocore and beamed it out of Murph's stomach. What now? Gwyn and the Diviner on the Protostar, they have the proto-drive, and we're stuck on the Rev 12. Holy crap, what are we going to do? The slaves start operating the Rev 12? Like they know how to fly it now? Because the Rev 12, the station, is kind of like a ship on its own. I'm not sure how they just learned to fly it. I mean, if you were a slave owner, wouldn't you be doing everything you could to make sure that the slaves could not operate the ship? Doesn't that make sense? So it's kind of far-fetched that they would just know. Maybe the fact that their ankle bracelets are giving them universal translation capabilities greatly accelerated their ability to learn how to control it. Maybe the controls are just very intuitive. I don't know, but it seemed a little weird to me. Chalk that up, another one for the list of things that seemed hard to believe in this episode. So we're chasing after the Protostar, and oh my god, Dal's like, okay, I can't believe I'm doing this. Fire on the Protostar. We're firing on it. And they have this idea to fire on the shield emitter, but that's wrong. Obviously, you're supposed to concentrate fire on one section of the shield with all your power, divert all power to main phaser, attack one area of the ship to overpower the shield, and then when we get a break in the shield, sneak in a transporter beam. That's what you're supposed to do, but they said shield emitter, and I'm not sure. Is the shield emitter weak? Is the shield weakest directly above the shield emitter? I think not. I think you want to go at the direct point between the shield emitters, right? Wouldn't that be where it's weakest? I mean, look up here, right? There's our shield status. Where's it weakest? In that corner there, see? You don't want to fire right there. Lucky that the monitor just switched to that at the right time. Kind of convenient. So we have just enough time to beam over Dal, one at a time per se. Dal goes in, guns blazing, 2 phasers. Alright, stick him up. But he's quickly waylaid by the Diviner, because the Diviner has strange powers over some kind of material on his suit. I don't know, it's cool, but I can't explain it here. Dal's losing. But because this isn't Discovery, every character gets a chance to shine, so Zero starts kicking ass. They beam over Zero, who is, of course, a Medusan. We all know the mere sight of a Medusan drives a man mad, so don't look at them directly, which is why Zero wore a protective suit this whole series so far. Zero rips its suit off and drives the Diviner into madness. Zero finally wins. Zero was abused perhaps more so than anyone else by the Diviner. Zero was used as a weapon to mind control slaves. That's pretty bad. So, the Diviner got his just desserts. But, here's the big but here. Dal and Gwyn are there too. And Dal's like, look at me. Look into my eyes, Gwyn. Don't look over there. You can't look. Zero is a Medusan. You'll go crazy. Don't look, don't look, don't look. But then, for one brief moment, Gwyn glances down at Dal's comm badge. And the reflection off the shiny surface of the comm badge reflects just enough light into Gwyn's eyes to drive her slightly crazy. And now she's in a semi-comatose state saying, we can't go, we can't go, we can't go, we can't go, we can't go. Over and over and over again, which is the last thought she had before she was driven Medusan insane. Nobody knows what it means. Only Gwyn knew. But Gwyn lost her short-term memory. So the audience knows, but the crew doesn't know, that we can't go back to Starfleet. If we go back to Starfleet, it automatically activates the viral weapon installed in the protostar. Intriguing. It sets up kind of a dark ending. It's at first sweet, but then the aftertaste is bitter. Our characters are okay. The Diviner is defeated. Dreadnought appears to be defeated. And Gwyn has made mostly a full recovery, but she has the classic Star Trek thing on her head. Little, what is it, a cortical monitor? Is that what it is? I don't know, I'm not a doctor. But the Captain Dal's like, alright, let's go back to Starfleet. And for a brief moment you see Gwyn go, like something's wrong. She just has this little reaction, like, oh my god, thinking in the back of her mind, wait a minute, we can't go back to Starfleet. But I don't know why. But you know why. You're the audience. They don't know. We have to wait months to find out. It's going to be grueling. I can't believe I have to go back to watching Discovery after this. God dang. We were doing good, too. We were doing good, guys. But now it's back to Discovery. I'm sorry. So this episode ends with them activating the proto-drive. And it feels like this scene was kind of like an after-credit scene, but it wasn't. It should have been an after-credit scene, maybe. Just to be a little bit more exciting, as it were. Guess what? The U.S.S. Dauntless picks up the signal of the protostar activation. So when they activate the proto-drive, it shows up again on the screen of the Dauntless. And who's captain? Well, it's Janeway, appearing to be Admiral Janeway. Similar in uniform to what we saw at the end of Voyager. In, the what's the last episode of Voyager? The two-parter, was it a two-parter Endgame? Remember that? I'm not going to spoil it here, if you haven't seen it. But her outfit in this looks very similar to what we saw in that. And essentially what's happening is that I don't want to spoil Voyager. So much of this is clearly an additional Voyager episode. It's like we're making another Voyager episode at the end of this. Okay, if you haven't seen Voyager, go watch it, the whole series. Turn this off right now if you haven't seen it. But in Voyager, there's an alien ship that disguises itself as a Federation ship in order to trick the crew of the Voyager. And it's the U.S.S. Dauntless. Okay? So they think it's a unique ship Starfleet sent out there just for the single purpose of getting the crew back home to Federation space. However, it's an alien ship in disguise. Okay? But the design is so cool, from what I can tell, that Starfleet actually used the design to create an official version of the USS Dauntless. I could be wrong. I may not know every single thing with the USS Dauntless. Correct me if I'm wrong. But this one has an NCC designation instead of NX, so it feels like this is an official Starfleet vessel. So the USS Dauntless has real flesh and blood Admiral Janeway on it, and we find the proto-drive activation signal. And she says, "I'm coming, Chakotay," because she still thinks Chakotay is on the ship. It's so cool that we're going back to these characters. Look at the difference, right? How Prodigy treats Janeway and Chakotay versus how Star Trek Picard treats Picard. Just think about it, right? Star Trek Picard is an old, feeble man who won't appear in uniform and feels like he's about to croak, and he just goes on the Starfleet apology tour for a whole season. Meanwhile, Janeway is back in uniform and trying to reunite with Chakotay. Fan favorite characters, doing what they do best. They're on top of the world, and it's intriguing. We need to save our friend. We need to save Chakotay, and this is going to be an awesome second half to this season. I think it's going to be awesome. Now, theories. Remember how Dreadnought appeared on the Protostar? He was sent over there with perhaps a subspace signal to activate latent code inside the Protostar's computer to create a replica of Dreadnought that acted just like Dreadnought. I think when they killed Dreadnought in this episode, when the slaves broke his head off, I don't think that was really Dreadnought. I think Dreadnought is a program. I think Dreadnought can exist wherever he is replicated. Remember that before, the Diviner had to plead with Dreadnought to do something, as if Dreadnought was above the Diviner. Dreadnought, it seemed to me that the Diviner was deferring to Dreadnought's authority on some occasions. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I thought I saw that. You may think differently. I think Dreadnought is a computer program developed by the people of Solum to be an insurance policy if the Diviner fails in his mission. And I think that the virus that the Diviner was describing, what that actually was, is that when the Protostar contacts a Starfleet vessel, you guessed it, it transports over viral code into their computer that causes the replicators on board their ships to create pieces of Dreadnought. I think that the point of this weapon was, number one, Dreadnought to be the insurance policy for the Diviner and keep him in line. And number two, to spawn millions of little Dreadnoughts on all the Starfleet ships in order to destroy them. Remember, Dreadnought appears in the intro. He's in the intro of this show. He's in every single intro that this show had so far. Ominously in the background, he's there. That must mean something. So, this episode, very intriguing. Afterwards, I was so intrigued, I looked up what the creators of the show were saying to see if they would give an interview. Not to me, of course, but to other people on the web, on the interspace Webernet. And they did. And they explained that, yes, not every question was answered, which is fine, because I came out of this more confused than anything, but they did say that they intentionally did not answer every question yet, and there is answers coming, specifically with regards to how the Protostar ended up in Tars Lamora, which is one of my bigger concerns. This episode does not even answer that at all. This episode answers questions about the Diviner, but not many about the Protostar. So that's forthcoming. So with that in mind, I cannot review this as if it's the finale to the season, because this is not claiming to answer every question. However, the answers we did get were worse than the questions we had in terms of how interesting they were. Like I said at the beginning of this review, I'd rather have the question than a bad answer. So, this episode, it's Star Trek Prodigy. It's beautiful. It's Star Trek Prodigy, so it sounds fantastic. Beautiful moments, intrigue, confusing, hokey moments, and a few things that are a little far-fetched. With all that in mind, I have to give this episode a 6.5. That's still a strong score, all things considered. But I think it could have ended a lot stronger. again, there I go saying ended. This is not the end of the season, evidently. We're getting the other half in a few months. So, if this was the season finale, I'd be more disappointed. I may be closer to 5.5 if this was the real season finale, and we had to wait years for season 2. But since we don't have to wait years, I'm going to go 6.5, like I said. A solid episode. It's not the high point. I preferred the first part of A Moral Star, to be honest. But, like I always say, your mileage may vary. I'm Lieutenant Mark, and I'm getting the hell out of here.